Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August edition of our No Fail Friday series, our monthly webcast series covering various mainframe security topics. My name is Len Thompson. I'm the community manager for our CA mainframe security community. Today we are joined by software engineer David Klopf, who will be presenting our session on implementing granular security controls in CA ACF2. Before I hand things off to David, just a reminder that if you have questions along the way, we ask that you please use the Q&A feature right in the WebEx window. If you don't see the Q&A box in the lower right of your screen, just click the question mark icon in the upper right and it will open for you. The last thing I just want to mention, we are recording today's session, and the replay along with the presentation will be posted out in the community either later today or Monday morning. So with that, I'll hand things off to you, David. Take it away.
Thank you, Len. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Great. I want to make sure I was off mute. So good morning and happy Friday to you all. Today we're going to be talking about implementing granular security controls in CA ACF2. My agenda for today, to start off talking about my objectives for today's presentation. We'll then continue into the introduction to the CA ACF2 resource class. We'll discuss controlling password and password field administration using that class. I'll provide an example of the help desk administrator using password field administration controls. We'll then talk about controlling certificate administration and a couple examples of those. And then I'll end the presentation with some helpful resources, final thoughts, and open up for questions. So objectives for today, by the end of the presentation, I'm hoping that you all understand what is the CA ACF2 CASECAUT resource class, what does that enable for you, how you can use it to provide granular security, and why it's necessary that you'd want to implement granular security. So what is the CA ACF2 resource class? The class is a predefined resource class with an internal class map record of type auth, new to CA ACF2 Release 15. We had a couple of requests earlier asking for this granular control, and so we decided to add some. What does it do for you? What it does is supplements the existing administrative authorities, so your special privileges, by providing the ability to authorize your users access to those administration functions without having to give them those high-level privileges. For instance, controlling password changes without enabling a user to control changing what entails a password, special characters, repeated characters, et cetera, et cetera. Now, why would you want to use this? Well, it's important to want to use it because you want to granularly control your administrative functions. You don't want folks who may not be able to access certain areas of your administration to perform administration that they shouldn't be. Excuse me. So how does it work in CA ACF2? The CA ACF2 resource class provides granular security controls using simple rules. Resource entities for these rules are based on the field that's being changed. For instance, if you want to change password field, the ACF cmd.user.password resource entity controls administration over passwords. When they're processed, CA ACF class calls are processed via SAF, and bypassing a security check via SAFDEF override is not allowed. When they're traced, sectrace output displays SAFDEF equals plus and force for the class events, and the rules can have logging sets for failures, log, and prevent cases. CA ACF rules allow for all scope controls for the target user in order to restrict which users they can change. So now you might be asking, what can I protect with CA ACF? CA ACF protects two groups of administration functions, the ACF command.user and ACF command.digtcert. These two groups correspond to users' passwords and user status and certificate-related administration commands, respectively. Which brings us to our first set of examples, controlling password and password field administration. CA ACF2 provides control using the ACF command.user.fieldName resource rules. The rules only allow for changes to password or user status related fields. It will not allow you to insert or delete any users or change any of the password controls. In addition, it protects against unauthorized users creating or deleting anything from outside of their scope. What are the requirements for using ACF command user field name resource rules? So the requester and target end users must not have security, account, audit, leader, or consult lids. No service permissions are allowed on these rule lines, only the access level permissions. And I'll provide an example of that on the next slide. The appropriate scope records must exist for the target users to restrict which IDs they can change. And the CA ACF2 resource rules must be resident. The next couple of slides here list all the various entity names for the different controls that you can do for passwords and password field administration. You see you can control passwords, password phrases, file counts, cancel, suspends. So this brings us to our first example. You have a help desk administrator who have a role called HLPDSK1, and you wish to allow these administrators with that role the ability to change passwords and unsuspend users for all users in their scope. So you might ask, what might a resource rule for this look like? At the bottom here, as you can see, we have a couple of just the output here from the command of what might be used to control this level of access. As you can see, we have the ACF command.user.password and user.suspend resource entities, which enable them, any role, user has to role help desk 1, to change passwords for a user or unsuspend them for all users in their scope. So just for a further example, if you have test user 01, that is a user under help desk 1's scope, help desk 1 could perform the password administration and unsuspend them. However, let's say you had a security administrator, SecAdmin, who's not part of help desk 1's scope. Help desk 1 would not be able to perform any administration over the password or suspensions of SecAdmin. This brings us to controlling certificate administration. CA ACF provides control using the DigiCert field name resource rules. These rules will only allow changes to digital certificate and keyring related fields via commands through TSO or batch, just like the previous examples. The requirements for using these resource rules, we use service levels instead of access levels. For instance, service read, update, or delete. Any user wishing to use these resource rules must have the appropriate scope records, like before, and the resource rules must be resident, like before. The following couple slides are going to show you all of the different resource entity names for the certificate commands that are controlled by the CA ACF class. There are quite a few of these, and I'm not going to read them all, so I'm just going to take a minute here and go through the slides. So this brings us to example number 2, certificate administration, and we're again going to use the help desk administrator as an example. So we have help desk 1, and we want to allow them to administer all certificate related objects for every user in their scope, and we want to log those commands. So what would those resource rules look like? In the solution section here, as you can see, we've defined ACF command.digicert.dash, giving him access to every single control for certificate-related objects. And between read, update, and delete, he has access across every ability for every user under a scope, and the log there says, let's log it. So what's the resulting behavior from these sets of rules? So again, using test user 1 as an example, if he's under Help Desk 1's scope, he can add, remove, or modify any certificate-related items for that user. Using SecAdmin as an example again, if SecAdmin is a privileged security administrator outside of Help Desk scope, he cannot perform any administration over him. And here's another example of certificate administration just to show the level of granularity that you could get. So using Help Desk 1 again, what if we wanted to just say we only want to allow them to connect and remove certificates from a user's keyring for all users within their scope? The solution to that, as you can see, is a combination of a couple of the command entities from a few of the previous slides. And all these permutations are documented in our doc, and I provided links to those at the end of the presentation here. So if anybody wants to check those out, more questions, those can help. But as you can see, you need connect and remove in order to connect and remove, and the update access allows you to use over folks that aren't you, if you are Help Desk 1, that is. So again, what's the resulting behavior here? Using test user 1, you can administer connecting and removing certificates from their keyring. But if you have SecAdmin, who's not under your scope, you can't do anything to him regarding his certificate. So a couple of resources that can help. The documentation for all of the authorizations required to administer these commands, as well as the various permutations of entity names and access levels that help you control the granular levels, are all found on the DocOps platform. Provided a link here in the presentation. In addition, below I have provided the links to the direct sections within the ACF2 documentation that speak to this resource class. Just some final thoughts for you folks. If you like what you saw, and a shameless plug here, please join CA communities and start submitting some ideation requests for future granularity enhancements. We really want to continue to provide the best support and enhancements that best suit your business needs. And in order to do that, your participation is definitely required. By submitting ideation requests, other community members can see what you're interested in and can vote on them. And by voting on them, we get an idea of what you guys would like to see in our products, and we can better plan and act on those ideas and get them out to you to provide the most value to your business. With that said, I thank you all very much for your time and open the floor for questions.
Thanks, Dave. And just a reminder, once again, if anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A box in the WebEx. Again, if you don't see the box in the lower right, just click the icon for the question mark in the upper right, and it will open for you. At this point, Dave, we don't have any questions. There was one question that came in that I'll also answer verbally. The question was, will the presentation be shared? Yes, I'll be posting it out in the community either this afternoon or Monday morning. So far, that's the only question. I don't see anything else coming in.
So I see a question from Colleen. Is this resource type only available when using roles? No, you can use UID strings as well. The examples I provided used roles, but you can use UID-based security. Lynn has asked if we'd like to see additional commands, like being able to control who administers expiration, would we add that to ideation? Yes. That is the best location right now to submit enhancement ideas, and others can vote on them, and depending on how the votes go, we can prioritize and schedule those enhancements accordingly. Lynn, you asked, can you also update user to have specific IDs? Could you please elaborate? you're saying, could you update the commands to specify control over specific users? So I have the authority to administer only password changes for this user, and this user? Okay. Yes, you would use scope records for those. So if your ID has scope over those three, you could do that. But if you're asking for a specific, like an ID field on the command, I would have to follow back up and see what we could do regarding that. You're quite welcome, sir.
All right, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I guess we'll wrap this up a little early. If anyone has any questions after the fact, you can please feel free to ask them in the community, either as a response to the replay that I'll post later, or as a new discussion thread. And Dave, I thank you for your time today. Thank you very much for the great session. And please join us at the end of September for our next No Fill Friday. Have a great Friday, everybody.
Have a good one.